Hi, everyone. I'm Cody. This is the Church of Logic, and we're at Incompleteness 2. I'm super happy to be joined by Dominik Kirst, who will tell me if I mispronounce his name. Dominik is a postdoc at the University of, you'll have to tell me how to pronounce that.
It's the Ben Gurion University in Beersheba, Israel.
Beersheba. Great. And Dominik is an expert on the incompleteness theorems, one of the few in the world. And he's done really cool work, which I hope we can talk about at some point. But I just brought him here today to explain to us a little bit how incompleteness works and the gory details, so we can really appreciate, the tangible facts of what the theorem actually says, rather than just trying to intuitively say, give you a vague intuition. We're going to actually kind of drill down about what the theorem actually says and how it actually says it. All right, Dominik. Before we start, though, can you just say kind of what you're interested in and what's going on with you?
Sure. So I can give a quick summary, which actually is connected to talking about incompleteness, because I kind of ran into this book called Gödel, Escher, Bach, as many people do. My was a computer scientist, and he kind of said, "Oh, this is a fascinating book," and so I got excited about the topic, which is about incompleteness to quite some extent during high school, and it kind of fascinated me a while. So during studying, I always kind of came back to this topic. And then very late in my PhD, I was really happy that from the work I did before, I found a very natural transition to looking at incompleteness results from a certain perspective. And there,
awesome.
together with some people in our group, I got a bit more deeply into it and found it quite nice.
Great. That is very exciting. I basically told almost the exact same story a few episodes ago. So it's kind of a convergence of the minds. All right. We have a little time. We might break this into two episodes. What I basically wanted to start with was there are roughly three conditions under which the incompleteness theorem applies. And as a reminder, the incompleteness says, hey, there are things that you just won't be able to prove with a given formal system. And these conditions are sufficient conditions. And I'll explain why it's cool that these conditions are sufficient conditions, because it means the theorem applies to many logical systems. But I wanted to explain the conditions in detail. And for that, I called on an expert, Dominik. And so I kind of want to go into the conditions one by one, and then maybe explore those, the reasons why those make for a very powerful theorem afterwards in a separate episode. So the first condition is what I called a reasonableness condition, right? You have a proof system, and the proof system allows you to know if you've proven something, right? That's condition one. Do you want to kind of explain what I mean by that? If you know, I can elaborate. If not,
yeah, I can try. So I guess it probably should stem from how math is a social process. So there should be a way how one mathematician who's convinced of a certain thing can convince someone else. So the fact of a proof, or the kind of idea of a proof, is that it can be checked by someone else. And be it a mathematician or kind of an idealized mathematician, so just you can even think of it like a program that follows certain rules, just obeys the structural rules, how a proof can be devised. And so in this sense, you can even make it extremely formal. You can even say that a proof system should be enumerable in the usual computational definition. So there should be an algorithm just printing out one proof after the other, or it should be semi-decidable, the other perspective on it. So you can, in principle, devise an algorithm that you feed in a proof that then computes for a while, and maybe at some point says, yeah, actually, this was a correct proof. So there's a certain computational idea behind what a proof system should deliver.
great.
Recognize.
So, in previous episodes, I talked for a while about Turing machines and universal machines, which great, but I think that don't assume everybody understands perfectly what Turing machines are, which is what you did. So that's perfect. Okay, so we have a reasonable system. We know that we can check, whether a proof is a proof, but we can't necessarily check whether a statement is a theorem, right? For that, we would need to look at all the proofs, and maybe you never find a proof of the theorem. But okay, so the second condition is sufficiently expressive. So this one is a little bit more vague. But maybe you have some intuition for what a sufficiently expressive system is.
Yeah, I think historically this was kind of tied to being able to express enough of arithmetic, so you can do certain things with numbers. In particular, you can encode things with numbers and show that this kind of gives you access to tools representing syntax or computation. Actually, this is one part where I think completeness or incompleteness theorems can be really nicely abstracted, because you can, once you found a proof, make very precise what actual representability properties you needed. But probably a typical way would be, you can say piano arithmetic or certain weaker systems. You can find out which arithmetical systems that are, or you say that computation, like you said Turing machine before, so maybe a logical system that can express what a Turing machine actually is. These systems will always be expressive enough.
Great. Okay, yes. I think I mentioned piano arithmetic at some point, but I certainly didn't explain it in detail. So, okay, so something that knows how to talk about Turing machines and what it means for a Turing machine to run for some finite number of steps. All right, so that's condition 2. Let's move on to condition 3, even though I'd like to spend more time here. All right, so condition 3 is basically your logical system is talking about true things. And again, I left that a little bit vague. But yeah, can you explain what that means? And if you can you explain what a logical system that doesn't satisfy this might say?
Sure. So I think first it's maybe good to look at this condition as a limit for the previous condition. The previous condition says you can prove enough things in your system. You can show that certain behavior can be represented, can be recognized within the logical system. The limiting factor in the third condition is that you can't prove too much. So you want to make sure that everything the system recognizes still corresponds to something you have in the outside world. Since we now said one instance for this representability is that you can represent Turing machines, you don't only want that in the system you can show that a certain Turing machine terminates after a certain number of steps. You also want to make sure that a system only thinks that a Turing machine has terminated if this is actually true in the outside world. And this is often called soundness, because it means that the logical system is sound for the external view. And you asked for a system that does not satisfy this. Well, you can imagine the system that just proves that every Turing machine terminates. For sure, it satisfies the second condition we had. It can, for instance, especially for all Turing machines that do terminate, it recognizes correctly, but it does too much. It shows or thinks of things that aren't actually true in the outside world, and those are ruled out by the third condition.
Great. Yes. Okay. So there's so much more I want to talk about, but I think this is like sort of a streamlined explanation of the technical conditions that you need to satisfy this theorem. And let's see, why don't we stop it here for a minute and then just kind of start again at this point and say, hey, this is why you should kind of care about these conditions. This is why these conditions are kind of reasonable. How about that?
Sure, it's a good plan.